Jason Carter is a nurse working in one of New York's busiest hospitals, found himself weighing 300 pounds and pre-diabetic at only 24 years old. Well, he knew something had to change, so he went on a journey of self-experimentation until he found something that really worked for him. Now, weighing 111 pounds less, working out in the gym regularly, he's taken his physique from obese to athletic. Join me as I talk to him about what he's found that is working for him and his observations working on one of New York City's busiest COVID-19 wards. Thank you for joining me today on another episode of Hunger Hunt Feast. With me is Jason Carter. Jason is a nurse in New York City and has had quite a health journey, weight loss journey that I can't wait to share with you. Jason, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation.
I heard your story. I appreciate it so much. I can relate to it on several levels with a transition from you were vegan to now carnivore. And I know there's a lot in between there. It wasn't just an overnight thing. Obviously, that transition, you've had quite a search for what you found to work for you. But it wasn't. It was. I mean, you were also quite overweight as well. I mean,
Yes.
were you like close to
my highest weight? Yeah, my highest weight was 300 pounds.
Wow.
And it was through the absolute desperation that I felt while being 300 pounds that led me to trying the vegan diet. I was very desperate to try anything to lose the weight as fast as possible. And the vegan diet just happened to find me at that time.
Gotcha. So how much have you lost? Would you, I mean, because you're very, I mean, I've seen your pictures on Instagram and you're very athletic. I mean, muscular body. No one would guess that you were once 300 pounds and obese. You know, you've got a lean body. You're very muscular. Definitely a gym guy. How much have you lost?
In total, 111 pounds.
That's amazing.
I started out with 300. I went down to about 189, 190. I can vary within 5 to 10 pounds throughout the week or so, but I dropped 111 in total.
Wow, that's amazing. That's awesome. So how did you?
Difficult.
I can't. I mean, yes, I've seen people do it, and it's not fun.
Right.
It's not easy. It's not a pleasurable experience to do that. And there's a lot of ups and downs and plateaus and frustrations that go with that. So you had to persevere. How long did it take you to lose that? Once you got on track with your final diet, how long did it take you to lose that 111 pounds? Give or take.
It's been an up and down journey. I want to say for maybe 2 years.
Okay.
Because I went from a vegan diet, failed that, rebounded onto a SAD diet, standard American diet. Then from there, I found my way into keto. Then from keto, I bounced back to a SAD diet once again. And then I finally found carnivore. And carnivore is like the only diet that I've been able to do sustainably and successfully for 3 years now. So it's been a rocky journey for about 2 years.
Okay. So for 3 years, you've been able to sustain the same diet. Is that when you found your most of your weight loss that stuck? Because it sounds like you went down, up, and then when it stuck, it was on that. Okay. Carnivore.
Exactly.
Excellent. So how much of your diet, I mean, would you say it's like 95, 98% of your diet is animal based?
Yeah, it's pretty much 100% at this point.
Okay.
Recently, I kind of experimented with fermented veggies like kimchi. Once in a while, I'll have an avocado.
Gotcha.
But as of lately, it's mostly just like 100% carnivore.
Wow, that's awesome. I love those too. Yeah, those are kimchi and avocado are definitely
it's pretty good
in my list. I mean, just for digestion and then for the potassium in the avocado, it's just a nice supplement there. So, how did you get to 300 pounds? I mean, are you? Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in New York City?
I'm born and raised here. Yeah, I'm born and raised here in New York City.
Okay.
As far as getting to 300 pounds, it's an addiction to food, to put it best.
Okay.
An addiction to sugar, fast food. I had a abusive relationship with food. I didn't see food as a means of fueling my body, as a means of energizing my body, giving it the nutrients it needs to perform. I just saw it as pure pleasure, as entertainment.
Mm.
and I used it to fill voids in my life, and that ended up manifesting in me gaining up to 300 pounds.
Wow. So this was like from the time you were young, or was it something that came on in adulthood?
Yeah, you know what? I think it started in my early 20s.
Mm.
I had just became a nurse. I started working night shift, and my
Ah,
coworkers had a tremendous habit of ordering food at night. We would order
sure.
barbecue, and I worked with a lot of Filipinos, so we would eat Filipino food, and it was tons
Mm.
of rice. And I
Right.
kind of just transferred that habit, on my own time, eating a lot of pizza and things of that nature.
Gotcha. So it was just a junk food kind of, and a variety
Oh
of
yeah,
food, but there are a lot of, with that kind of shift, and you're eating at night, which is probably the worst time to,
exactly.
to eat when you're supposed to, hormonally speaking, when your circadian
Right,
rhythm wants you sleeping and healing rather than
right.
ingesting food. Okay. So yeah. And the night shift, I'm sure didn't help. So that got you up to 300. What was your breaking point? Like at what point made you say, I've got to do something about this? Because
Well,
some people continue, some people live their whole life that way.
right. Well, at first, when I started gaining the weight, I remember my medical scrubs would fit tight on me.
Mm.
And my rationale was, oh, maybe the dryer is like shrinking my clothes. You know, I
Yeah.
just refused to believe that I was actually gaining weight. Then one point there was this nurse educator who walked up to me in front of all of my coworkers and said, "Hey, you're getting fat, right?"
Oh,
And that was, she didn't say to be mean, but it felt very humiliating. But it was
sure.
the wake up call that I needed. So I
Mm.
remember that same week I bought a scale, and I stepped on the scale, and it said 298 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
And for whatever reason, I thought I was maybe 220, 230. I was just completely, delusional. And once I saw that 298 on the scale, I said, this is absolutely ridiculous. I weigh as much as two people, and I'm
Mm.
only 23, 24 years old. How can that be? Um, so once I saw that number on the scale, I said, I have to do something to change this. There's no
Yeah.
way I could be a healthcare provider and weigh 300 pounds. It doesn't make sense.
Right. And yet you see, probably see a lot of that, a lot of people in nursing and medicine who don't really regard their diet or their
Right,
health and fitness, personal health and fitness that much. They're just they're there, they're doing their job, they're caring for other people sincerely, but they're
right,
not caring for their own health. I mean, I think
right,
I hate to project that and to say that I've seen that, but I think it's true. I've seen considering um, what they're there to do, how they're helping people with their health, and they truly are, not questioning the sincerity or their level of delivery of their job, but as an example, as a personal
right,
example, I understand that conflict that you had.
right.
That you wanted to, as you're a healthcare provider, what were you saying about you know um, your personal health when you're 300 pounds? Were you having any other health issues, like any blood sugar? Did you notice any, or did you have any blood work done, anything like that? I mean, was there any,
Um, I mean, my only comorbidity at the time, I guess you could call it, was pre-diabetes.
okay.
I have no other medical history other than that.
Mhm.
But one thing I want to add is I noticed that when I was a 300-pound nurse, my patients would not take me seriously. Imagine me standing in front of my patient. I'm telling them, hey, your cholesterol is too high. You should eat these kind of foods, or you should exercise more. You should stop smoking. The patient looking at me and they're seeing this 300-pound nurse, short of breath, sweating. They look at me like I'm a joke. They don't take me seriously. It's
Mhm.
almost like I'm being a hypocrite. And I noticed that quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard the same thing from actually doctors as well, who had a similar experience
Hmm.
where they found themselves pushing 300 pounds and
Hmm.
realized they felt like a hypocrite. They, just like what you said, they
Right.
felt like, why would my patients listen to me telling them, giving them advice when clearly the advice isn't working for me,
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
And I'm
Exactly.
sure at that point, your advice was basically the standard recommendations that, food pyramid, low fat, kind of
Yep.
avoid red meat, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Fat's bad for you, cut your
Right.
calories, that kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. So that clearly at that point, you weren't even paying attention to it. I mean, it sounds like at 23, 24 years old, you were not even um, aware until you were called out by your coworker, but you were not even conscious of the fact that you might be you're pushing up against diabetes. You know,
Right.
how unhealthy, potentially unhealthy, like you were on the edge because of your youth, because you were only, you're
Right.
still 23, 24 years old. You were not having a lot of comorbidities. 10 years down the road, you could have been in a very different place,
Absolutely.
hormonally, medically
Hmm.
speaking, with a lot more conditions. If that,
Hmm.
even just stayed right where it was,
Right.
uh,
Right.
so she called you out on it. Your coworker calls you out. And so what was your first action? What did you do? What did you
Hmm.
start thinking, I need to do something? What did that
Hmm.
look like? What was your first step in your journey?
Well, I remember around the same time, the whole vegan movement was starting to pick up. It was gaining more popularity.
All right.
So I remember going home, and on YouTube, there was this documentary called Earthlings.
Mm.
And I watched that, and I remember I was horrified by what I saw. And after watching that, I said, you know what? I'm never eating another animal again. There's no way. There's no way I will possibly put another piece of meat in my mouth. Then I saw another documentary called Forks Over Knives,
Right.
and I had the same response to that. And keep in mind, I had absolutely no knowledge of nutritional science. I had absolutely no knowledge of what ketosis was versus glucose burning. I had no knowledge of the the the, the complete myth of fiber and so on and so forth. I
Mm.
was still indoctrinated with what I was taught in nursing school.
Sure.
And the vegan documentaries just further drove that home. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to be a vegan. I saw this other documentary called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead.
Oh yeah.
And that kind of motivated me to go on a juice fast for about 76, 78 days, I believe.
Mm.
And I lost a lot of weight, and I was motivated by it. People were telling me, hey, you're looking good. But I was feeling worse and worse.
Sure.
But I kept going along with it because hey, I look good in the mirror, and I thought the plants and the fruits were giving me the nutrients that it needed. Um, so really, that moment when the nurse educator told me, "Hey, like you're getting fat, you're overweight," that was kind of the catalyst that drove me to find the vegan diet.
Sure. Gotcha. Because you just started looking and that's what popped up. And
Exactly.
you said there's a lot of people, there's a lot of marketing behind it. There's a lot of money behind it. And it's kind of a trendy, fun movement
Right.
with a lot of young
Right.
people. Uh,
Right. And in New
fa-
York City, vegan diet is like that's the whole craze. Like it's very
it's the new
easy to be a
black.
vegan.
It's the
Yeah,
new,
yeah, exactly.
it's the new cool thing to do.
Right, right.
Yeah. So how long ago was this? You said maybe like 4 or 5 years ago or?
No, this was maybe 24th the time, so 10 years, about 10 years ago, I would say.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I've
Okay.
done I've tried it twice, by the way. I was a vegetarian as a kid for maybe about 2 years, 3 years, I would say.
Okay.
Then I found the vegan diet when I was around 24. First time I tried it was a year and a half. Then I tried it again, and that was for about a year. And I failed miserably both times.
So what do you think caused your failure on the vegan diet? What caused you to go back to, I'm assuming you went from vegan back to a standard American diet.
Right.
So what caused you to fall back to that
Hmm.
fast food kind of eating?
I constantly felt tired. I had
Mm.
terrible insomnia. I'm sure working night shift had part to do with that, but I felt even worse than prior to starting the vegan diet. I was actually gaining weight after the juice fast, despite the fact that I was eating all organic fruits and veggies and grains. I was continuously gaining weight, and no amount of cardio that I did in the gym would help reverse that.
Hmm.
Began feeling more irritable. I began feeling absolutely terrible depression, terrible anxiety.
Mm.
I started developing aches, specifically in my left shoulder and my right knee, and lower back pain. I felt 4 times my age. I was 24, 25 years old, and I felt like I was at least 80 years old.
Gotcha. Wow. Wow. So you're missing out on some important nutrients there, obviously, that were
Right.
and getting
Right.
and a lot of inflammation from all the constant sugar
Right.
and the juicing and wow.
Right.
Wow. So you were really
And
feeling it all.
and I also think, in retrospect, I think that vegan diet was also destroying my gut. I'm almost certain that I've developed some form of leaky gut syndrome. And if I have to look
Mm.
back, with the exception of the sad diet that I followed, I believe it's from all of the anti-nutrients from the plants and the fruits and the grains that I was constantly eating on a daily basis that kind of stripped away at my
Mhm.
gut lining and caused dysbiosis as well.
Sure. Sure. What was your protein source on that diet? What was you Well, I know I
Hmm.
talked to a lot of vegetarians and vegans. They're trying to get the protein in, so they either go to supplements or they start eating
Hmm.
just a ton of beans and nuts, which
Right.
tends to blow up their gut just from trying to
Yep.
digest all of those. So is that what you were doing?
I eat a lot of beans, a lot of tofu, and a lot of those meat replicas like Morning Star and
Oh my gosh, yes.
all of those crappy products. Yeah, and
Ugh.
I had a lot of pride eating it. The veggie burgers, like I became the vegan that was kind of arrogant and obnoxious.
Oh,
So I
good.
would,
One of those.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
actually, that's about 99%, I think.
Right.
Sorry. No, I get it. It becomes a badge of honor. And because
Right.
you really are suffering for your cause. I mean, honestly, you're not only
Exactly.
giving up like really great food that everyone else is eating, but you're
Hmm.
truly physically suffering. You're
Yeah,
feeling pain.
but you
Uh,
feel morally superior, so you disregard that. You know,
yeah.
you feel
Yeah.
morally superior
Virtue
to other
signaling.
people.
A
Yeah, exactly,
lot of virtue
exactly.
signaling.
Right,
Yes, I'm suffering for the cause.
right, right.
And yet you were physically getting sicker. So okay, so then that's a big jump. So you went vegan, sad, vegan.
Hmm.
What led you to carnivore or keto? Let's just go to the keto. So because that's quite a jump.
Right, right. So at this point, I think I was maybe 250, 260 pounds.
Okay.
And I was once again looking for a way to lose weight. So I started Googling, diets to lose weight. And I had to skip maybe the first 4 pages because it was all things that I had tried already. I did keto, I did the low fat, fat free nonsense. I mean, I did vegan, low fat, fat free. So I skipped the first 4 pages. On the fifth page, I finally found something that said a ketogenic diet. And at the time, my only concept of keto was what I was taught in nursing school, which is ketoacidosis. You
Right.
know,
Type 1
so
diabetics. Right.
yeah, exactly. So I kind of ignored it at first because I said, "There's no way I'm going to do that." Um, but anyway, I kept on reading, and then I pretty much learned that your body can run off of fat. You can eat a high fat diet, eat low carb. It was pretty much the opposite of everything that I was taught in nursing school. So I
Mhm.
said, let me read some people's testimonials, and almost all of them say, I was able to burn fat, I have more energy, it cured my depression, my anxiety, so on and so forth. So I said, you know what, let me give this a try. Um, I also read Jimmy Moore's book, Keto Clarity,
Mm.
and that kind of provided me with, no pun intended, a lot of clarity on what the ketogenic diet was. And that kind of motivated me to give it a try.
Yeah, that's a great book. That's a great book. And he's definitely
Hmm.
done a great job of getting that message out from his own
Right.
journey, his own experience. So you were keto. So how successful was that? How long were you on that keto diet, and what kind of success did you have with that?
It was great. I think I was on it for about 2 years, I would say. Yeah,
Mhm.
about 2 to 3 years I was on the keto diet. The first thing I noticed was the abundant amount of energy that I had. It was my first time. I will never forget. It was woke up maybe 3 in the morning, and I had just this crystal clear mind, an abundant amount of energy, like unlike anything I've ever experienced. Afterwards, the fat just started dropping off quickly without me even trying.
Wow.
My depression went away. I had a much better mood. I was able to focus much more.
Mm.
Um, then it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years later that I found this blog called Zero Carb Zen.
Mm.
And I pretty much gathered from that you don't need vegetables or fruits or anything of that sort. You can just thrive on animal based foods. And at the time, that seemed a bit extreme to me.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was at that point I was already pretty much 90% carnivore. I was having meat, eggs, and then once in a while I have like an avocado. So I said, screw it, let me just dish the avocado and see what happens.
Go all in.
And I've pretty much right, and I've been carnivore ever since.
Gotcha. Wow. So it really worked for you. How many? So okay, let me ask you about meal frequency. So when you were a vegan, let's say that vegan,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm guessing when you're on a standard American diet and you were just kind of doing whatever, food was like whenever it popped up, it was when you felt like it or when somebody ordered something. It's kind of random. There wasn't really much order to your eating. When you were vegan, how often were you eating?
Right. Oh God. At least 5 times a day. I was
Oh,
always hungry.
okay.
I was always hungry, no matter how much I ate.
That's about right. That's what I guess. That's what I remember as a vegetarian. I was a vegetarian for 3.5 years, and I was always
Mm,
hungry, chasing protein, cravings, and
mhm.
however much black beans and almonds I ate, I still couldn't quite get enough. But
Right.
uh, so when you went to keto, I would imagine that your meal frequency and the amount of times you ate in a day,
Mhm.
dropped quite a bit. Would you?
Oh, absolutely. I was eating maybe two times a day. Sometimes I wouldn't eat. Sometimes I would forget to eat. Sometimes I would wake up, go to work, go to school, come back, and then I realize, hey, I haven't eaten at all today. But I didn't feel hungry. I didn't have an appetite. It's just a tremendous feeling when your body's running on fat as opposed to constantly chasing the sugar high.
Mm-hmm.
It's night and day, night and day.
Your body could actually access that fat for energy, whereas
Right.
before when you were having sugar, you couldn't access the fat. So it was just the fat stayed on, your energy drained because you can't burn the fat because insulin's up all the time. And so now you've got your
Exactly.
insulin levels low, blood sugar's low, and you can actually burn a day's worth of calories without being hungry. And you weighed 230, 240,
Hmm.
probably at least when you
Hmm.
started.
Hmm.
That's a lot of calories to move around New York City because I'm guessing you weren't in a car. You were on public
Right.
transportation, you're walking, you're going everywhere.
Right.
That's a lot of calories to burn strictly from body fat. Getting
Right.
around New York City, uh, I mean, you weren't sedentary, clearly. So
Hmm.
with that kind of schedule, um, wow, that's amazing. And so the keto, it probably might not, I mean, now that you're carnivore, it's probably very similar, like once or twice a day, I'm guessing that you're eating.
Yeah. Well, I used to practice a lot of fasting. I used to practice OMAD, 1 meal a day.
Sure.
Now I eat typically 2 to 3 times a day.
Okay. So you found something that's more like sustainable, maintaining. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
you're not trying to lose
Also
weight
lower.
right now. Yeah.
Right. Well, actually, I am trying to lose weight right now. The whole lockdown kind of added a few pounds to me.
Well,
So,
there's something to that. I would imagine. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I'm focusing on burning off some of the fat, and our gyms are opening next week. So I'm looking forward to that.
They're opening in New York City
Next week.
next
Next week,
week.
I think. Yeah. Well, the governor put it into law that the gyms can open as soon as August 24th. However, many haven't met the guidelines yet. My gym
Okay.
specifically is opening on September 2nd.
Okay.
So that
Congratulations.
should be
Because I
fun.
saw there was a
Yeah.
lawsuit. There were like 1,500 gyms suing.
Right.
I don't know if it's
Right.
the state or the city of New York. It was one of the two. I just saw suing New York.
Both.
Okay.
Both. Yeah.
Get something
Yeah. And
done.
rightfully so.
Take it to court. Yeah. Yeah. Restaurants are
Right.
hopefully next for you guys. You can actually
Right.
get some food indoors before it gets too cold. Um,
Right. Right.
yeah. Well, I feel bad for you guys up there. You've got quite a tug of war
Mm.
with which seems to be politically driven with, there's certain things that seem to be okay for people to gather in or going to the
Right.
store, but you can't eat in a restaurant or go to a gym. And
Right. Right.
uh, it's a shame that it's become that kind of, it's come to the point where business owners are suing their own city and state so that
Mm.
they can continue doing business in one of the few offerings that are actually healthy and helpful and beneficial to people in terms of their health. Um,
Right.
so you've been carnivore now, you said, for 3 years.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so that has basically allowed you to get to your current, I mean, give, um, allowing for COVID, the COVID-19, whatever. I'm sure it wasn't 19, but allowing for that. But I mean, it allows you to get to your current kind of maintaining state where you are, again, where you're working out regularly, you're taking care of yourself, you're living a carnivore, and you have plenty of energy you found on the carnivore diet.
For sure. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
And blood work's good. You're healthy.
Yeah, my blood work was great, but there's one thing I want to mention. So my last blood work was done February of this year, and the doctor was freaking out because my total cholesterol was high. I think it was maybe like 200, 240 or above, something like that. And he was freaking out saying, hey, your cholesterol's too high. I think you should look into these statins. And me being a nurse, I absolutely objected it. I said, no, my LDL was low. Actually, my LDL was high. My triglycerides were very low.
Yeah.
My A1C was flawless. The only issue I had was that my fasting blood glucose was like 95. And I wanted it to be a bit lower.
Sure.
But aside from that, my blood work was absolutely fine.
But that fasting blood glucose is still below even a pre-diabetic level. That could have just been because it's morning, and maybe your blood sugar's up or you're active, cortisol's up, you've got a little extra blood sugar.
Exactly.
I know mine is higher even when I'm fasting.
Exactly.
Mine can be higher in the morning. I can have 90 in the morning and I can be 70 in the afternoon, and I can't tell a difference personally.
Right.
But my liver wants to dump some more glucose first thing in the morning and get me going, wake me up. So that's just part of it. But low triglycerides, LDL carries triglycerides. So if LDL is high and it's carrying, you got high triglycerides, and you got high triglycerides and your insulin and your high blood sugar and you got an insulin issue, then yeah, that's something to be concerned about. But in a insulin stable or a low blood sugar state where you're not insulin resistant, you're insulin sensitive, excuse me. That's what I was looking for. Insulin sensitive, low triglycerides, and you just have some active LDL, that's just delivering your normal cholesterol where it's supposed to go or circulating it back to the liver. Not a concern for anything. And the last thing you want to do is throw a statin in there to throw off nerve, muscle, tissue, and all the other risks that come with that, with really no benefit whatsoever. And you're healthy otherwise. It's like, why? I mean, it's an unfounded fear of one number.
Most healthcare providers are miseducated with regards to cholesterol.
Oh yeah.
But we're taught in school, like, cholesterol is completely demonized. It's labeled as the cause of heart disease. And no one takes into context, the function of the endocrine system. No one applies it within the context of eating a high carbohydrate, insulin-inducing diet. So a lot of times I kind of have to argue back and forth with these doctors and explain to them why I want my cholesterol to be high. Why would I want to take a medication that's going to lower something that is vital to many functions in my body? And they kind of draw a blank, but I can see they're just repeating the dogma that they've learned in nursing school or med school. Right.
There's plenty of studies correlating high LDL with extended longer life, better cognition in life, better brain function, higher IQs, and resistance to disease, resistance to cancer, all with higher LDL in an environment that is not insulin resistant. In a insulin sensitive environment with higher LDL or more cholesterol, you have better outcomes for all-cause mortality, cognition, and resistance to infection and disease. And yet, those aren't the studies that they're seeing. They're just seeing the ones that the statin pharmaceutical rep is sticking under their nose, right? So you have a big statin push where that seems to be where the education's coming from.
And then the stats show that I think at least 80% of the people who suffer heart attacks have normal cholesterol levels.
Yeah, it's not it's not even a good correlation.
Exactly, not at all.
No, it's not a consistent correlation at all. And to look at total cholesterol and then forget about talking about particle size, where you're talking about, how many particles do you have? And again, you're going to get blank stares and things going overhead and that, which comes down to really triglycerides. You know, it's like, can we
Right.
just, how about we focus on that and really look at that as a risk factor more so than this total number, which could be, could be high for more than one reason.
Exactly.
Yeah. And not, they're not, some are good and some are bad. So it doesn't tell the whole story at all. So what kind of, I'm sure this must come up not only in your own visits, in your own personal health care, but as you're serving people in the healthcare industry and serving the patients, and you're seeing, you know, issues with people's, that's obviously their diet or something, whatever they're in there for is related to their immune system, their diet, their current lifestyle and health. There's got to be some conflict there because, you know, not only what they're being fed in the hospital, but what the doctor is telling them, what the other nurses telling them they need to do to change their lifestyle versus what you know. I mean, how
Yeah.
much conflict you have with your own knowledge and personal experience
Yeah.
versus the standard message. I mean,
It's an everyday struggle. It's an everyday frustration. An example I like to give is a patient can receive a diabetic tray for breakfast, and on that tray there's pancakes, there's toast, there's grits.
right.
But
Oh,
because they give you sugar-free syrup for the pancakes, that makes it a diabetic diet. Never mind the fact that the plate is filled with grains. The sugar-free syrup makes it diabetic.
wow.
And I
Probably
frequently get
fruit
patients
juice,
who
right?
tell me,
Too.
oh, of course, you gotta have your apple juice.
Oh,
And I frequently get patients who tell me, it's only when I'm in a hospital that my blood sugar's high. At home, my blood sugar's fine, maybe in the 120s, 130s.
oh,
But for diabetic, that's somewhat okay.
that's
But
manageable.
when they
Yeah.
come to, yeah, when they come to the hospital, it's 200 plus, 300 plus, and they don't get it. And I tell them directly, it's the food you're eating.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that's changed between you being home and you being here. It's the food you're eating. So what we're doing is we're giving patients food that spikes the insulin, that spikes their blood sugar, and now we have to come in with subcutaneous injections of insulin to correct the mistake that we made with the food we're giving them. It's so backwards. It makes absolutely no sense.
Wow. I recall that my uncle had congestive heart failure, and he was in there for this was many, many years ago. This was like the early 90s, I think, late 80s, early 90s. So it was
Hmm.
all, I mean, it was probably worse then than it is now. And they brought him, you know, just like what you described, it was like pancakes with syrup and juice and not much any kind of protein at all. And my
Hmm.
dad called him. He's like, "Is this what you bring to a diabetic heart patient in the hospital?" And the nurse was like, "Oh, I didn't realize he was diabetic." So they probably just bought him the sugar-free syrup. But you know, it was the change
Right.
wasn't much different. The change wasn't much better. It wasn't much of
Right.
a different. But I mean, literally, you know, he's a diabetic heart patient, and they were loading up with the pancakes and the syrup and the juice and the. I mean, you kind of wow, you know,
Yeah.
can't what else can we do to make sure these people stay sick?
And
Um,
I brought this up a number of times. Why aren't we feeding patients diets that doesn't require so much insulin to begin with? If we fed them food that doesn't have a bunch of grain, that doesn't have a bunch of corn and starches, then maybe they won't need 20, 30 units of insulin.
right,
But the hospital, they feed patients food that's cheap, that's subsidized by the government, and these are largely corn grain-based foods. So they're
right.
going to feed you the cheap pancakes and the toast and the rice and things of that nature because it's highly affordable, as
Oh yeah.
opposed to feeding someone a more low-carb, ketogenic, carnivore style diet.
Well, that'd be unheard of. I mean, that's just yeah, that would
Mm.
be revolutionary to do something
Right.
like that, and they would lose some funding because there's so much
For sure.
corporate-driven um,
Yeah.
money from the Kellogg, Coca-Cola, and all those. There's
Right.
you know a few big corporations who have the contracts to supply the food to the hospitals, the
Hmm.
schools, the military, the senior facilities. They have the
Hmm.
government contracts, and so what they make, it's got to be processed food, and so it's all that's
Right.
what it is. That's your choices.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so if you had some conflict with your other medical staff, medical providers in what when you're trying to maybe even give some side, a little advice on the side, like, hey, when you get
Yeah.
home, check this out.
Yeah.
Have you had a few run-ins with other medical staff?
Quite a few times. Quite a few times. The worst part about this is that we as nurses are mandated to teach patients certain criteria on what diets to follow. And if a patient has some type of cardiac disease, but within my nursing scope of practice, I'm supposed to tell them follow low fat or fat free diet. Make sure you get your whole grains. Make sure you eat numerous fruits and veggies. Stay away from red meat because of the cholesterol. Try to eat more lean chicken breast. So I am mandated to teach them the complete incorrect nutritional science based on the patient. If I know the patient's open-minded and willing to learn more, then
Right.
I'll give them the printouts that they're supposed to get upon discharge. But I'll pull them to the side and say, hey, I used to do this. This is what worked for me, and this is why. And if the patient is receptive and open-minded, then I'll gladly tell them. There have been moments where doctors or dietitians have noticed me saying these things, and they have threatened to write me up or get me suspended or report me to my manager because
Wow.
it's considered malpractice. It's considered malpractice if I tell the patient, hey, the reason why you need so much insulin is because you're eating the whole wheat bread that's supposed to be healthy for you. It's because you're eating all of these seed oils that's supposed to be heart healthy.
Mm.
I can get, I can essentially be sued in court for giving that type of information out because I'm mandated to give specific guidelines on what type of diet they should follow. And it's all based on outdated science.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's just bad science to begin with. I don't know what year it was. It was just bad. I
Right.
mean, outdated is a kind way of describing it because there were plenty of people saying, maybe we should hold off and look at some studies before we put this out there to the whole country. And the politicians
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to run forward with it. So we need something to say. The
Mm-hmm.
nation is waiting. Let's just put it out there before we have the studies. I mean, it was never good science. It was never.
Well, they are looking at studies, but the studies they're looking at is founded, like you said, by Kellogg's,
Yeah.
by General Mills, by McDonald's. So they're looking at the studies. They're just looking at highly biased studies that are skewed to give them the stats that they want.
They're looking for a lot of correlation in epidemiology, not clinical trials.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They're not looking at clinical
Exactly.
trials that are comparing a low carb diet because there aren't too many. Compare a low carb
Right.
diet to a standard American diet with a low fat. But they're looking at
Mm-hmm.
correlation in epidemiology and food frequency questionnaires, as I know you're familiar with, where people are just
Mm-hmm.
answering questions about what they ate in the last year, and then they try to pool this information
Right.
together and draw conclusions. Not really a study, not really.
Right.
So it's more like kind of choose where you want to link, draw the lines, from connect the
Right.
dots. So
Right.
how did you, I mean, you were there obviously and working as a nurse during through all this COVID-19 stuff. So you were in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital. Were you working with COVID patients?
Yeah. When it first started, I had maybe 3 or 4 patients who were
Mhm.
COVID positive. And then shortly after that, our entire unit, every patient was COVID positive. So
Wow.
we would have maybe I would say about 40 patients per unit that
Mhm.
was almost always COVID positive.
Okay. Were these severe cases often? I mean, were like,
To be honest with you, at least 80% of these patients that were positive, you couldn't even tell. We would converse the same way you and I are conversing right now. I would have a conversation, I would interact with them. You could not tell that they were COVID positive. They were asymptomatic. Then there were a few who needed to be intubated.
mhm.
But normally I found, at least in my experience, I found that their reason for being intubated or their reason for having these medical difficulties were more so based on their comorbidities
Mm.
than it was COVID itself. Um, but
Okay.
working within a hospital, you're not really allowed to like kind of step out and say things like that because you will be reprimanded if you do.
Within the hospital.
Oh yeah.
For the you mean mention the comorbidities are more of the problem than the COVID.
Right, right. An example I always give is, someone can fall in the street and crack their skull
Yeah.
and bleed to death from that. But if they just so happen to be positive of COVID or presented with symptoms of COVID, by state law, I think the health department mandates that you have to put cause of death is COVID-19, not necessarily a hemorrhage.
Mm.
So that causes a false inflation of the deaths by COVID.
Hmm.
And anyone who has died by COVID, in my experience, they almost always, actually, they always had a list of underlying comorbidities, whether it be diabetes, they were obese, um, maybe they had prior history of cancer. They
Mm.
always had some type of comorbidity that actually drove the cause of death, in my opinion. I don't think it was necessarily COVID itself.
Gotcha. So it was just it compromised their immune system enough that they could not overcome the illness. Is that what you mean? So
Right,
what were your
right,
most
right.
common? I mean, obviously, bleeding out from cracking your skull is not your most common comorbidity. I mean, as an
No, no,
example of that was certainly the case. I mean, I've heard of those
right.
hit by a car, come into ER, they've been injured, but they test positive. So, but what was your most common? Would you say non acute injury? Okay,
Hmm.
comorbidity where you looked like more like a lifestyle or health or immune
Yeah.
issue. What were the most common? You'd say.
So the top three: hypertension,
Hmm.
diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and coronary artery disease.
I
Those
see.
those are the top three.
Gotcha.
Almost always, at least 85-90% of the patients I deal with have those three comorbidities.
Gotcha. Those are the ones who were intubated typically,
Oh yeah,
or
yeah,
died, or passed away. Right.
right.
Okay.
Uh,
Huh. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that is certainly the information that we read. If you're looking for it, you saw hypertension, obesity, and
right.
and diabetes often, or cardiovascular
Hmm.
disease. So those are the most common that you saw in the hospital.
Hmm.
No, the people that were, I'm curious about the people who are asymptomatic. Why were they there? Were they there just because they tested positive? Or
Exactly. Exactly. So they'll present to the hospital maybe with the fever,
okay,
and then upon testing, then they find out that they're positive. Or some patients, I mean, you're tested by default, regardless of what you come into the ER for. They're gonna test you by default. So maybe you have a stomach ache, or maybe you had an allergic reaction to some food or something like that. They test you, and you're COVID positive. You're gonna be admitted to the unit.
really? So if you tested positive, you got admitted. No one got sent home with like, okay, be careful and let us know if you have any extreme symptoms. It was you came to the ER
And
with a symptom of some sort that may or may not be related to COVID, but you tested positive and they
mhm.
put you in the ward?
Yeah, so in the beginning, they were sending people home who were testing positive but asymptomatic.
Okay.
Then, when we started entering the peak of the pandemic, then they started admitting these patients who tested positive. And I think part of it was, I don't know if it was to quarantine them, but a lot of times I would walk into these rooms and I'm thinking, like, aside from the fact that you're positive, what are you doing here? We're not doing anything for you. There's no medicine I can give you. I'm just checking your vital signs. Maybe I give you some IV fluids. But aside from that, there's no real reason for you to be here, from my clinical judgment.
Wow. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Okay. Other than the fact that you guys are going to give them this wonderful food you have in there and spike their blood sugar, um, and make them more susceptible. But what I mean, okay. So as I recall, there was a lot of concern with uh, flooding the hospitals and overwhelming the hospital staff space. I mean, there was in New York, they had a whole ship sent. There were some outdoor hospitals built. There was or outdoor, but I mean, they were outside the city limits. They were just they're pop up, sort of speak,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
a lot of ventilators sent there to. And you guys are bringing people in because they tested positive, but are really have no symptoms that need to be treated. I don't understand. I'm kind of confused.
Yeah, so am
If
I.
you're
So I'm
if you're
confused too.
overwhelmed, if you have an overwhelmed hospital, why are you bringing people in who have like a fever and a sore throat or a tummy ache?
Well,
I mean,
one thing
I'm
I'm
sorry. Were
confused
you were
about
you
is,
overwhelmed? Was your hospital overwhelmed?
so, all right, so I won't lie. There were moments where I thought, this is absolutely insane. We are overwhelmed.
Okay.
Um, I don't think it was the volume of the patients we had. I think it was sometimes it was the severity of their illnesses. But I myself have walked to other hospitals, and I know some nurses who work in other hospitals,
Yeah.
and they'll say, hey, like, it's been pretty slow lately. And then you go on social media. I don't know where the hell they found the time, but you go on social media and there's healthcare professionals doing these TikTok dances, and they're all choreographed and they're dressed in costumes. So I'm like,
They have a lot of time on
what
their hands.
yeah, I'm like, where, from my end, I'm like, where are you getting this time from? I don't have time to do that. But at the same time, I look at them and I say, if these healthcare providers have time to do this, doctors too, then clearly the hospitals aren't being as overwhelmed as we're being told on the media. And I saw a few videos of people touring other hospitals, and they're like, look, all of the paramedic trucks are parked. Nobody's being rushed into the hospital. And I had to ask some of my friends, and they're saying the same thing. That's not to say that there weren't days where we had busy assignments, absolutely. But I think overall, I don't think the hospitals were these overwhelmed death zones, as the mainstream media was putting it. I think a lot of that was just to manufacture fear, in my opinion.
Wow. Manufacture fear.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
what we needed.
And I know that
We
sounds a
needed more
bit
fear.
conspiracy, but
Yeah,
right.
no, we needed more fear. There wasn't enough of it. Let's manufacture some.
Exactly.
We didn't have enough fear from COVID as it was. So now, obviously, there's a lot less volume, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Are you still see some COVID coming in, or are you still
Here
treating
and there.
asymptomatic patients?
We'll get some here and there, but what I'm noticing now is that the hospital is running a bit slow because people are so afraid to come into the hospital because they don't want to catch COVID. So someone who is having some type of hypertensive crisis or stroke of some sort, they're scared to come into the hospital. So now everyone's staying home. So now the hospitals are not absolutely slow, but they're slower than normal because people who would have otherwise come into the ER, they're now staying at home, to remain safe.
Gotcha. Wow. Yeah. So you have people really have to be there, want a need
Right,
to show up to
right,
the ER.
right.
Now, I want to bring up I want to say a sensitive subject, but it was a subject that came up in the news,
Sure.
and with the focus on the minority population in New York
Mm-hmm.
being suddenly having more cases, for instance, in the
Mm-hmm.
minority population per capita,
Mm-hmm.
as a higher percentage of the minority population having issues with COVID and coming to the hospital than others. And so did you notice that? Did you see like an influx of more Black Americans or more Latinos, or
Mm-hmm.
you did? Okay.
Well, I mean, it's hard to compare because my hospital, they generally serve people of the minority descent.
Okay.
A large portion of my patients are of Hispanic and Black American descent. So
Okay.
there wasn't much for me to compare with.
Gotcha.
But if I had to guess a reason why it's affecting minorities more so than others, is because minorities generally have a lower level of health. They unfortunately they happen to be number one at numerous diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, obesity. So they are already at risk for having lower standards of health, of developing numerous diseases as they progress through life. So in my mind, it would make sense that these people are being more affected by COVID. I don't think COVID is attacking them specifically. I don't think they have anything in their genes that makes them more susceptible. I've noticed that the lifestyle factors
Gotcha.
in the minority community seem to be a bit more unhealthy.
I think there's maybe some more undiagnosed diabetes and undiagnosed health issues.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many times we get patients who come into the hospital with a blood sugar of over 400, 500, and that's when they find out that they have diabetes.
Wow.
Maybe they could have been diabetes for the last 5, 6 years, and finally they reached a tipping point where their blood sugar's off the charts and they're sweating and they feel weak and they're dizzy and they just don't feel right. And then they come into the ER and then they find out, hey, guess what? You have diabetes. It happens all
Wow.
the time.
All the time.
All the
Wow.
time. Yeah.
Okay. And that is the
Hypertension too.
well, of course. Yeah, that would go with
Yeah.
that, wouldn't it? Kidney
Right.
disease, all that kind of stuff coming down the road.
Right.
Wow. That would make sense. And that's, as you said, that's the population that your hospital commonly serves.
Mm-hmm.
So you've seen quite a bit of it. Wow, that's enlightening. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I think
Yeah.
that's a side. I mean, 1 year journey alone is a lot for people to kind of see your search and what you actually found working for you. So you feel like, as a carnivore, just to circle back, you're getting all the nutrients you need
Mm-hmm.
from, and does that take, so you're not just eating, I mean, what does your diet look like? I mean, you're just eating steak, or do you have a variety of animal foods to get those nutrients, or what do you?
Right. So when I first started, I was mostly eating steak.
Mhm.
Now I eat a variety of things. I eat beef, salmon roe, I eat organs such as lamb brain, liver.
Awesome.
Occasionally I'll have some kidney, I'll eat bone marrow. So I'm pulling from various sources to get the nutrients that I need.
Wow, that's not always easy to find either. Some of the, like, lamb
It's
brain.
not,
I don't see. I mean, even in
it's
New
not,
York, I
yeah.
would think you gotta
Yeah.
like a Haitian.
I,
Uh,
I, I had to search very hard for this, yeah.
okay, somewhere where they're more ancestrally still rooted in their
Hmm.
diet, that's serving
Hmm.
like that kind of food in a shop. I mean, I can. There's a few places I know where I can go find even just liver, and it's usually a
Right,
Hispanic market where I can find
right,
some liver, or some bone marrow slices, or some beef cheek, which is kind of fatty, which
right.
I kind of like to season up just to add some fat to things. But it's but the organ meats, yeah, very nutrient dense. So you can get most
Absolutely.
of your nutrients between liver, kidneys, the brain,
Right,
heart
right,
is a great one for
right,
CoQ10, obviously, but the liver, the most nutrient dense. Um,
right.
so you're not really having to use a lot of, so let's say, external supplements to get the nutrition that you need at all. Doesn't
So at
sound
the moment, the only supplements I use are real salt, Redmond's real salt for the sodium.
okay. Salt.
I'll Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I'll take potassium chloride powder.
Okay.
And I started taking that now because I'm eating less meat than I have before. And because I'm eating less meat, I noticed that I have to supplement with that potassium chloride to meet the deficit.
Okay.
Um,
Eating
and then I'll
less
take
meat.
less meat. Yeah. So when I first started carnivore, I used to eat maybe 3 or 4 pounds of meat per day. And I believe
Oh,
I started developing histamine intolerance, among some other things, as a result of doing that.
okay.
Now I eat no more than a pound of meat per day. I eat maybe about 75 to 80 grams of protein per day. Whereas
Okay.
before I was eating upwards of 300, 400 grams of
Oh, I
protein per
see.
day.
I see. Okay.
Right. So sodium, potassium chloride, and magnesium glycinate. That's about it. I don't supplement with anything else.
I take that myself, especially just to prevent,
Yeah.
especially in the summer with dehydration and just sweating and being outside and exercising.
Right.
The magnesium is great for just helping you
Right.
hold on to some fluid and those electrolytes there. And the potassium.
Mm.
So you're eating. So that's your muscle protein, your muscle meat, and then in addition
Mhm.
to that, you have the
Right.
organs, the other nutrient dense, micronutrient dense organs, like
Right.
the brain, the liver, the kidney. Okay,
Right. Right.
okay, because
And
those are
I
not really
practice
protein dense.
not at all. And I
Yeah.
practice a high fat approach. So I
Okay.
would say about at least 85% of my calories come from fat, and the other 15 or so comes from protein.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
so it's
where's
more
your?
like a ketogenic style carnivore
Yeah.
diet, if
No,
you want to
that's
call it
great.
that. Yeah,
That's great. 85% from fat to help kind of sustain your. That's energy. I mean, that's energy food, but it's not
right,
elevating insulin. It's not getting in the way of
right,
accessing body fat necessarily, other than it's caloric. But it's
right.
so what do you have? Do you add fat sources then? Do you add? I mean, you're not eating as much meat. to get that much fat, most people think, oh, he's eating a lot of meat, because usually meat has a percentage that is fat, but you must be, to get 85%
fat.
fat, you're eating less meat, you're supplementing some fat in there.
Right. So I'll add butter. I'll cook with lard or ghee.
Okay.
I'll add bone marrow, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just eat like the raw fat trimmings.
Raw fat, what?
The raw fat trimmings. Like
Oh,
if you go to your
trimmings. Oh,
local
right.
butcher, right?
You
Yeah.
just get the
They'll
trimmings.
just give it to me for free. Yeah.
Yeah, because nobody wants to pay for the fat.
Right.
So they trim it all off.
Right.
We get so mad when we go buy something that's supposed to be a fatty cut, and they've trimmed all the fat off of them. Like,
It's frustrating.
those are my minerals.
Right. You're cutting off the best part. You know, like
The
I'm going to
nutrition.
buy a ribeye and they're trimming off all the fat. It's like, I want the fat. And they look
Yeah.
at me like I'm weird.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you want the fat? Just give me the fat, please.
Yes.
Put it in a big bag. I'll take it home.
That's why I bought ribeye. That's why I didn't get filet. I didn't get a New York. I got a ribeye
Right.
because I want it to have fat in it. Or I get we have a tri-tip, which is more of a Western thing, but it's a cut on the leg that's supposed to be pretty fatty. And around, they just cut trim all the fat off. It's so frustrating. And there's not only the flavor, but all the minerals. So you're buying the fat trimmings. You've got the organ meats do have quite a bit of, I say quite a bit, but they have a higher ratio of fat than your typical muscle meat in them as well. Do they not? It depends on the fat. I guess it depends on the organ.
So especially
the brain, definitely.
Yeah,
does.
Specifically brain. Right.
Wow, the brain is.
And occasionally I'll have some heart as well.
Yeah, awesome. Wow. That the liver, I have a hard time. I've got a doctor that put some extra fat in, maybe cover it in hot sauce. I just haven't quite gotten used to the liver taste.
Do you cook yours?
Cook it. Yes.
Do you?
Okay. Wait. You're eating raw liver?
Yes. Yeah.
Liver sushi?
I eat all my organs raw, by the way. I eat liver raw, I eat brain raw, heart I eat raw. Yeah, it's extreme, I know. But liver, I actually prefer the taste of it raw than cooked.
I might have to try that then. I might have to try that. Okay, so we're getting a little off subject, but you're the first person I've spoken to and I've interviewed a few carnivores who's telling me they're eating raw, because my concern is, how long has it been sitting behind that window in the store, in that little case? And it's like, what could happen to this organ? It probably doesn't have the same level of decomposition as like a muscle meat, but so you're not concerned about any kind of bacteria or anything. As long as it smells good, you can eat it.
Well, I started experimenting with raw carnivore January of this year. And I'll even eat beef. I'll eat raw salmon. When I do eat something raw, I make sure that it's grass-fed and from a sustainably clean-based farm, a regenerative agriculture-based farm.
Sure.
And it'll arrive frozen, and I'll just let it thaw for a little bit, and I'll just eat it just like that.
Okay, so you're getting it from good sources, and that's been well cared for, and they've packed it and it's sent. Yeah, because I'm going to these stores and going, how long has that liver been there? There's no way for me to know how long that liver's been in that case and how it was handled when it got here. So I kind of want to, but I may just try searing it just so the outside is like covered, because that's the one place you don't have to be concerned about. You just sear it and then leave it raw inside and have a lot more of those nutrients available. Right. I have yet to see brain. I've seen heart.
Some people,
go ahead.
What some people do is they'll chop up the liver into little small, I guess, capsule size, and they'll just down the liver like that. Yeah.
Just swallow it.
You really need like maybe 1 or 2 ounces to get like, an abundance of nutrients.
Oh yeah.
So people chop it up into little bite sizes and swallow it like a tablet or so.
It's a vitamin. I mean, there's A, D, K, E. I mean, it's like it's a vitamin. I mean, the liver's nutrient dense. The brain, with all the fat. So I'm guessing that's, in addition to the trimmings, that's one way you're getting your 85% fat source. Heart, the CoQ10, which is great for metabolism, and our cells need it. The mitochondria need it to create energy, as well as just being good for the heart, in our heart in general. But it's an energy magnifier. I mean, we need it for metabolism, the CoQ10. People don't realize that, but that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've created a new challenge for me uh, to try some raw organ meat. My wife's gonna look at me like I am nuts. Do you season it much? You use hot sauce, or you're just like popping the stuff and swallowing and
I sprinkle a little bit of salt and I just down it like that.
salt?
Yeah.
Okay.
The liver I don't add anything to. Liver I eat it semi-frozen, no salt.
Oh,
But
there you go.
the brain and the heart, I'll just sprinkle some salt on and just eat it just like that.
Liver sickle,
Yeah,
frozen
yeah, pretty
liver.
much. That's my dessert.
Boy, that's your dessert.
Yeah.
Tempting. Tempting. So you don't have a lot of dinner dates over at the house, I'm guessing.
Oh man. You should see, there was this one time I actually brought a day home and she looked in my fridge and all she saw was meat and organs, and the rest of the night did not go well. Let's
She's
just say
thinking
that.
I
Like,
found Jeffrey Dahmer, right?
yeah, exactly. Like there's
Oh,
brains and hearts inside mason jars, and she was like, what the hell is going on? Yeah, it was not a
oh,
good look.
that
It wasn't a good look.
that yeah, that would take some. Yeah, you might throw a warning shot first. You might want to like
Right.
let them know.
Right.
Yeah, I don't collect these. These are not experiments, and I'm not robbing. I'm not a grave robber. This
Right.
is food and nutrient dense, and give me a moment. But
Right.
that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny because it's hard enough to go out to a restaurant, I would think, with the way you eat and just, people go look at you funny because you just have the big fatty steak or roast or
Right.
whatever it is you can get,
Right.
um, at that restaurant without anything, no potato, no vegetable,
Right.
no, and it's weird enough. But then when you get home and you got organs in your, frozen liver and stuff in a mason jar that's sitting there waiting to
Yeah.
be consumed raw. I
Right.
mean, they think, man, what an animal I've got here,
Right. Right.
or this guy's a serial killer. That's hysterical. But
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, I've definitely had my share, and I get enough side looks from my kids and my wife on some of the things that I
Hmm.
eat, and they'll
Hmm.
just kind of, okay, dad's at it again. But
Yep.
I can't imagine dating where people don't have any other reference for you other than, you're just getting to know somebody and open the fridge and it's like, there you go. The real
Yeah.
me right there. Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Jason, thank you for sharing this, because this has been really enlightening as far as everything from not your diet, but not just your diet, but COVID, um, immune system, and how that affects our
Mhm.
ability to handle a disease, and then just your journey in general. I think has been a sincere search for finding what works for you, and I
Right.
would imagine that in your future you're going to be helping other people the same way, because there's a lot of people who have the same concern, they have the same needs, and they're
Hmm.
not sure where to look. So, and
Right.
you being a nurse, you're definitely, your personality is you're you're a caregiver. You take
Right.
care of
Right.
people. Um, I could see you coaching people very successfully in this, if nothing else, just making the transition from vegan to carnivore, or just in weight loss. It's like, this is helpful,
Right.
and not in a dogmatic way, but just, this is the journey. You took a journey. You were a
Hmm.
learning journey. It wasn't like you turned a corner and went from vegan to carnivore in a week. It
Right.
was a learning process. You unpacked things. You ate a variety of foods, even as keto, um, and just allowing people to find what works for them. Obviously,
Right.
but with
Right.
your own story. Um, so I really, I hope that that's something that you consider uh, in the future, with just help. There's enough people out there. They need some guidance. They need help, and they need a story. They need to hear a story like yours, where they gives them some hope for their
Hmm.
own health. Where can people find you on social media? What's the best place to, because you've got, I'll cheat. I'm going to say, I know I've seen your Instagram. You've got some incredible
Hmm.
before and after. So anybody listening to this, check out his Instagram. because he's got some great before and afters posted where you were 300 pounds versus now looking like gym ripped, lots of shoulder muscle, bulking up, and I mean, not bulking, but looking like an athlete, basically very athletic body compared to, I mean, you look like a different person in those pictures.
Yeah.
You
And
really
I purposely keep those photos on my phone just so I can prove people that what I did worked.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Show that to a doctor. I mean,
Yeah, right.
argue with this, pull out your little correlation study and I'll show you my before and after picture, because the experience, you can't argue with your experience. He can't argue with the change, and knowledge does not start from academics. It doesn't start with, not all of our knowledge should not be stemming from a correlation study or some sort of research study. It's got to start from a personal experience.
Right.
You have an observation. I walked through this. I lived through this. Worked. You want to do a study about what worked for me? Great, but you can't argue with results.
Exactly.
Both from external results of weight loss and how you look now, as well as your blood work, from pre-diabetic to healthy. You can't argue with that kind of experience. There's no research study that can outweigh, to use a pun to some degree, that can outweigh your weight loss. You know what I mean? You lost over 100 pounds and you're healthier for it. Take your research study and burn it, because it's not worth the paper it's printed on when you can see change, positive change in a human. Anyway, I'm going to soapbox again. I'm starting to preach, but it's like, it's frustrating to me just that people still argue in the face of human experience with a correlation study. There's just, they're ass backwards in there, and where they're starting with their knowledge is in the wrong place.
Yes. And I say this all the time. I say, your personal anecdotal experience trumps whatever study you can read in the article. I had a dietitian who heard that I was following a ketogenic diet. And she says, you're one of those people. And I said, yeah. And she started talking badly about the ketogenic diet. And I asked her one question. I said, have you tried it? And she said, no. I said, why not? She said, well, I've done the research. Okay, but have you actually tried the diet? And she says, no. So then whatever opinion you have really doesn't hold that much weight, because you're just referring to studies, but you haven't physically tried the diet yourself. You don't have any anecdotal experience or results from it. So you're just parroting something that you read in an article.
And there you have just wrapped up the entirety of the nutrition industry right there. That's it. That's the nutrition industry right there, parroting what they read in their textbook, in a research article, what their professor said, who has a professor with probably no clinical experience in helping people, but just parroting papers from studies that they weren't a part of, that somebody else that was funded by, we know who, Kellogg's, Coca-Cola, or some other big grain product. And yet they feel they can pick on or take apart or ridicule somebody who actually has walked through a health journey from overweight and metabolically unhealthy to an athletic, lean, fit body. And it blows my mind. The arrogance.
Right.
I've been doing this too long. 22 years. Been talking about low carb since 2002, and it's like all I've gotten is it's just pushback for 18 years. So let me get back to you. Sorry, I kind of get you triggered me. My own frustration. So on Instagram, it's at the Keto Apocalypse, right?
Yes.
It's the Keto Apocalypse.
And on Twitter, the Keto Apocalypse, and Twitter is at Keto Apocalypse. Okay.
Yeah, Instagram. Check out his Instagram, guys, because the before and afters will stun you, and drive the point home that this is this. Even if you're not eating raw liver and brains, you can still make a huge difference in your, and not all carnivores have the guts to do that, but I mean, I think that's fantastic because you are getting all your nutrients like that. You're
Right.
not missing anything by eating
Right.
nose to tail, which is truly what you're
Right.
doing.
Right.
You're eating a real ancestral diet because that's the way we ate. Not
Right.
even 300 years ago. We're not talking about 3,000 years ago. We're talking about even, and some cultures who stay remote and have not adapted the Western, and not been inundated by the Western civilization, are still very much eating nose to tail, and they're disease free, and they're living long, healthy lives. So I think that's amazing. You've just inspired me to level up in my food, and take on more ridicule from my kids. So one more way, but always I take joy. It's one more way to embarrass my kids, which is one day you'll know. That's just, nothing gives you more joy than to make your kids horrified and embarrassed, because it's like a bit of revenge to embarrass your kids a little bit with something that you do that's strange. Oh, did I lose your connection? Are you there? I think I lost you. You're frozen. All right. Are you back? Okay. And I think it's me. Oh shoot. You
Okay,
there?
I can see you now.
You can? Okay, good. Because
Yeah.
it was me. It was
Yeah.
my internet
Okay.
just kind of went, and you were frozen. I'm thinking, oh, what happened? I realized it was mine. So anyway, I was saying it's
Oh,
just
okay.
one more way to joyfully embarrass my kids, and nothing gives me more pleasure than to embarrass my kids and horrify them, and make them think I'm a weirdo. It's like a little bit of revenge
Right.
against, for all the many times that they were mouthy and talking back. It's just, if I can embarrass them with some sort of odd food, it gives me joy. But I've gone a little over.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you longer, but I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you've shared. So check them out, the Keto Apocalypse on Instagram, Keto Apocalypse on Twitter, and I think there'll be more coming from you. Are you planning on coaching at some point?
Yes, I'm currently in training now to become a health coach. I do provide some coaching sessions to a few people, but I want to work on becoming certified, so
Mm-hmm.
that way I can broaden my skills and experience to even more people.
Awesome. That's fantastic. You definitely should. I think with everything you've gone
Yeah.
through and everything you've experienced and searched out on your own, you definitely should be sharing that with a lot of people and helping a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there need your experience. So again, thank you for your
I
time,
agree.
guys. Check him out follow him on Instagram, and look for him on YouTube. I think soon. I think he's going to be. I have a mutual friend told me you're going to be on there. So I would imagine a similar handle on your YouTube.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So something
Yes.
like Keto Apocalypse or something like that. Okay. Awesome. Jason, thanks again. And I look forward to,
It's been a pleasure.
I look forward to hearing more from you. And I might have to hit you up for some organ prep. Food prep, organ prep, organ ideas. Like, how do you swallow this?
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks again, and have a great weekend.